Okay, I think we'll get started. So welcome everybody to our webinar this evening. My name is Melania Buba. I am an executive member of UNF Ottawa-Gatineau branch. I'm a member at large. And tonight we have a very special presentation with Lesia Maruschak with her Project Maria exhibit honoring the Holodomor. Our panelists today are probably familiar to you. We have Victoria Karpiak and Ola Mostitska, who will be assisting with tonight's webinar. As you probably have figured out, you do not have the ability to speak or have your video on during this webinar. That's intentional so that we're able to preserve bandwidth when we're playing the multimedia during this presentation. There will be a combination of interview style, video clips, and photos. So it's best just to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. That said, you will notice on the bottom of your screen, you do have a chat button. Please do put questions for Lesia in the chat as we go. These will all be reviewed during the question and answer period at the end of the presentation. But please continue to ask your questions as we go so that you don't forget and as they come to you. I do want to mention that this presentation today would not be possible without the generous sponsorship of the Ukrainian Credit Union, who have been very supportive of our digital or virtual events during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are very grateful to them for that. And this presentation will be recorded and available on the UNF Ottawa-Gatineau YouTube page. In due course, you will get an email once that is posted. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lesia Maruschak. Lesia Maruschak is a research-based artist working with photography, text, video, and sound. In her practice, she juxtaposes historical and contemporary events, materials, and processes to question photography's potential to reanimate history and to point to current social justice and human rights issues. Maruschak approaches photography as a dialogic medium to negotiate past and present, personal and social documentation and interpretation. Her work has been shown widely and published internationally, and she has lectured at several conferences. In 2019, Maruschak's seminal work, Project Maria, received the Director's Choice Award at the Santa Fe Center. In her book, Maria, from this project, she received the Grand Prix Award at the Kyiv Arsenal Book Festival and was shortlisted for several other awards. As a 2019 Canada Endowment Recognition Fund grant recipient, Maruschak is finishing a film on Canada's World War I internment operations. Maruschak has a master's and an MBA. She spends her time between Saskatchewan and Ottawa, Canada. I welcome Lesia Maruschak to our event this evening. Thank you for being here with us, Lesia.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join the panelists, and Melania, you as the moderator. We've had several conversations in order to bring this to life. And welcome to all the participants. We look forward very much to your questions so that this can very much be, a conversation about the Holodomor, about Project Maria, and about art in general.
Perfect. Well, we'd like to start this evening with a short video clip.
In this gallery, you will see Maria and O Canada by Lesia Maruschak. The exhibition is on view until Saturday, August 1st. And as I said earlier, if you take a peek into the galleries, into the windows that face King Street, you will be able to see a lot of Lesia's installation there. There are few places around the globe that have escaped the scars of genocide or repression or fear. Lesia's installations reclaim individual memory, and in claiming for herself a personal, familiar history, transcends the self to articulate our collective history. Her tears become our tears, causing the oceans to rise at first imperceptibly and then in a torrent of inconvenient truths. Lesia moves quietly, uneasily between countries, Canada, the Ukraine, the United States of America, working to create necessary monuments to the past. If we are silent, the monuments become a tribute to our own inability to act. The artist cautions her viewers about the alarming tendency to blend fact and fiction and to sow doubt about established norms, which harken back to periods when demagogues spun new myths about the past, present, and future and combined them with spectacles. We live now in a world of globally televised spectacles where those in power hold on frantically at any cost to their fragile power, waving mirrors to deflect the light from their own covert actions. We cannot let the mourning for human decency, for the loss of public morality, for simple human kindness to force us into another collective silence. What is our ethical responsibility to say what we know, to say something if we see something? These are the questions that Lesia asks in her installation. I think they're very, very apropos to what is happening in the world today because of the coronavirus pandemic. To introduce the artist to you, Lesia Maruschak is a photography-based artist with a unique lens on the creation of mobile memorial spaces. She was born in 1961, not 1916, she's not that old, in Saskatchewan. She spent her childhood on the Canadian prairies, land settled by her ancestors in 1874. In the mid-1970s, she first picked up a camera to which she did not return until 2016, when a diagnosis of leukemia led her to change her life's direction and commit to making art. Lesia's work is a complex exploration of memory and sensual expression. It informs and expands what it means to create memorials in an age where the why and what of museums is in question. How will we reopen? What is the best way to do that? What is our responsibility to our communities? Lesia makes artwork that crosses platforms. She uses installation, paperworks, photographs, books, films, and in 3 years has been shown, and in the last 3 years has been shown in the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, Spain, Holland, France, Mexico, Greece, Korea, Italy, and Spain. Her works are held in private and special collections around the world. It is really wonderful that we will be able to show you her work in this walkthrough. And just as a final note, Lesia holds an MA in ethnography and an MBA in international management. And I think that you'll see when you look at her work that both of those really influence her output as an artist.
Wow. Lesia, who is Maria and how did she come into your life and what inspired you to create this project?
Project Maria was based on an earlier body of work that I had started, and that project was called Erasure. And that very simply started with a box of photographs that belonged to my husband's family. When I went through them, I was struck by something. There were photographs that were torn, pieces were torn off, torn away. And I began to think about how we erase people from our lives. And that's a practice actually, that dates, to, I think about 4th century BC, if I'm not mistaken, this notion of erasure, of wiping away, of misinforming. I mean, we see it in photography, probably even still today. And so I started to look at Ukraine with that kind of a lens. And that was, I think, very much when I began to explore the notion of genocide, the wiping away of cultural identity, the removal, of churches, and the impact that Stalin had on, the country of Ukraine. So that was sort of the first body of work. And when I completed that, I looked at it and I wondered, and I said, well, what else did Stalin do in Ukraine? Well, the next thing that came to mind to me immediately was the Holodomor. And, I had known some people that were survivors of that period. I became terribly intrigued by it all. And I was, for the most part, dealing with archival imagery, that which was available to me, some of which was, taken directly from the internet. And I started to develop different bodies of work to try to, I think, express how I was feeling about it and what I thought about it. And as I was sort of going along doing this, two things really well, probably three stand in my mind. The first was giving voice. I was so deeply impacted by, the millions of people that had been, systematically starved to death. And I kept thinking about loss of voice. And I thought, who gives them voice? So I developed a body of work to try to do that. The next thing that really came to me was this notion of numbers, of wanting to count, of wanting to know. And at the time, as I was working on this one area, there was, something came up in the news and it said, 34,692 people died. And I thought, wow, how interesting to know exactly how many. And with the Holodomor, we struggle with that number. But then I went back and I asked myself, would it make a difference to know exactly how many? Because to me, what became so terribly tragic and painful was the fact that we could do this to any human being. And the fact that we systematically did it to millions of people, was something that I think we will always have difficulty facing, difficulty understanding how mankind can do something like this. So, I was working on those two things. And then I really wondered if any of my friends, had family members that might have been impacted. So I went on Facebook and I put out a call and I said, hello, I'm doing, Project Maria. Does anybody have photographs? And a woman I knew, but I had no idea she, her family had any connection to the Holodomor, wrote to me. She said, I have a photograph and it's the picture you see here. And she said, Maria, the little girl in the middle, was in fact a survivor of the famine. Everyone else in her family perished. And, our family is willing to give you the right to use the imagery. And I made it, I was very honest with them in saying, this is how I work as an artist. So I really manipulate things. You saw Maria in the very opening image, she had a vinoc on in red. In another image, I've given her wings. And I said, are you okay with this? And they said, absolutely. So Maria is known as Maria F. That is what her family has requested, and that is what I respect. She's currently still with us, in fact, a resident of Ontario, and I believe she's about 95 years old. So Maria became, she became all the Marias. She became the face for me of the famine. She was a way of personalizing the story, definitely, for us, those of us who understand and know about the Holodomor, but also about people that never heard about it. Because all of a sudden, this atrocity, right, that, we couldn't come to comprehend, the act behind it, but there was a face of this beautiful young girl. And so that's how Maria, in essence, was gifted, I think, to this project and to its legacy. And I'm terribly grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you this question, Lesia. Of all of your solo exhibitions all over the world, which one stands out in your mind and why does it stand out for you?
I guess I should start out maybe talking even a little bit about exhibitions. There are, I was listening to Tracy Emin, very well known, very, very well known British artists say, that I'm only interested in creating. And that's where I get all my joy. And the exhibition part, isn't that important to me. And for me, I think it's the exhibition is very much part of the art, even, I would go so far as to say, because I'm always interested in knowing if the art is working. And that's kind of the language I use. I like to know when people come into the space, are they impacted by it? I remember my very first exhibition, it was at Kyiv as part of the Scotiabank Photography Festival. And I remember someone giving me feedback. They said there was this man here and, you know, he found it all so disparaging, the work. And I said, fantastic. I said, it moved him. And I said, I know the work it's doing what it's supposed to do. In the Church and Visual Arts Center, which is, you know, the very first clip you were showing, people walked among those, you know, those white shadows, those silks that float in the air, and were crying. So I think for me, every exhibition is important because I learned something. Some have been terribly important, like the ones we're showing right now, and that was just, this just closed in Landskrona in Sweden. And this dealt with the architecture of memory, and Project Maria was a winner in Sweden. So this was, you know, a very important festival. So, you know, that's been a huge honor. I think though, and I mean, there were many others, I would never, you know, devalue any of them as an artist. This was in Paris. It was dedicated to my friend Peter Lindbergh. He had just passed away, and I happened to have an exhibition in Paris, you know, literally a month after. So that was, you know, very important to me for those reasons. But, you know, maybe the one that for me really, really never leaves my heart is the one in Saskatoon, where I opened Project Maria. And I knew I needed to take that home, you know. There was something so very clear that that is where I needed to bring that work to first. And it was a wonderful institution, the Ukrainian Museum there. And I'm very thankful to, you know, the family that made it possible for the artwork to be brought there, and for that local community, because they were so committed to bringing Project Maria there. But what for me always stays with me is the fact that my father saw it. My mother had had the opportunity to tour one of my earlier exhibitions in Ukraine. And so, you know, she and I traveled, and, you know, she got a really good sense of, you know, what's it like to walk through this exhibition space. She had an opportunity, you know, to see the art on the walls, to talk to the spectators. So I'd had that very personal and intimate experience with my mother in 2017, but my father had never had that chance. And, you know, he was able to see the work very shortly before he passed away. And to me, it was important for a lot of reasons, because my father, my entire life, was an incredibly, you know, strong advocate of what I was doing, regardless of what it was. And I remember very much sort of a couple of years ago when I was, you know, very busy curating the work of another artist, my father kept saying to me, Lesia, where's your work? You know, and that was always, you know, every time we talk, he'd go, and how is your work coming along, right? And, you know, I never had a very good answer for that. And finally, you know, there came this period where I found my work. So it was so important for me, for my father to be able to walk through that space, to see the work that I had created, to see what it was that I wanted to share, and to see me as an artist, because I've had a very, you know, varied life. I've been, you know, terribly fortunate to be able to have done very different things. You know, as I think Marianne at the Turchin said, you know, with my diagnosis of leukemia, my life changed. And so that brought me very much to art. And I grew up in a very, very creative household. You know, both my mother and father were very artistic, you know, and with different expressions. So to be able to share that with them was certainly for me most important on a very personal level.
Yeah. I think he'd be very, very proud of you, Lesia. And we're all very proud of you for also having won a most distinguished award on November the 8th just a few weeks back in Saskatchewan, your hometown, your home province. You won the Nation Builders Award, and we're going to look at the interview that was made there.
Hi, I'm Lesia Maruschak and a recipient of the Nation Builders Award for 2020. There's something about being raised on the farm because you're very comfortable with taking a lot of risk in farming communities because there are never any guarantees, there's no certainty. So I think I brought that kind of an attitude to what I did. I really believed in what I thought we needed to do, and I wasn't afraid to take chances. I wasn't afraid to learn or to fail. And so I think that kind of, a prairie ethic came with me. Clearly my, love and knowledge of languages, because Ukrainian was in fact my first language. So that made a large difference and certainly contributed to, my ease and fluency within government when it came to bilingualism, etc. But I think it was, what really stands out for me was the pride I took in what I did. The value I placed in working in community, because I believe, I grew up in a very small town, and I think when I was there, maybe we had, 102 residents, Alvina proper. So I very much understood how communities functioned, and I took that with me to the organizations that I became part of. So I think those kinds of things, those, very fundamental grounding values and structures that I came with as a prairie girl really made a difference. And I mean, they continue to play throughout my life even today. But I think maybe what I'm most proud of is sort of the last group of people I worked with. And, I think what I'd learned over all the years was that team really does mean something very, very special. So to me, I think at the end of the day, as an executive leader, we're coached at the end to develop a legacy. What's your legacy program going to be? And I never really gave that a lot of thought, but I am really grateful that the things I worked on were very much things I believed in. And in the end, I learned, and it took me time to learn the value of that group of people that I would bring together that would give, more of their day to me than they did to their family. And how important it was, to celebrate them and to care for them. And so I think for me, if I had to be selfish, that was my biggest, thing I take away. Oh, completely. I left work. I knew that there was no way that I could continue to work the way I was working. I didn't have the capacity in many different ways to be able to continue to do that. I also, because the type of leukemia I have is incurable, it's never been very clear as to when it might become active or, how long I might have. So there were always these kinds of questions. And, once I was diagnosed, I always asked myself, if this is your last day, what do you want it to be like? Maybe one of the biggest things that changed was I knew I no longer needed to achieve anything. So I really started to live more on a 24-hour clock, I think. And I became much more present in my life. That, that's for certain. I think all the time while I was in government, I don't know how I became this way, but I was always very future focused. So I wasn't the one that be bemoaning the past, right? And rarely was I in the present. I was always in the future. But I think leukemia really brought me down to the moment. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably one of the hugest changes. I mean, clearly I, moved to working in the arts. All kinds of different things happened in my life. I became a philanthropist. I did a lot of charitable work. But if I have to think about it, I think that is probably the biggest shift. I really found the moment. And then there's sort of this other chapter of my life that really deals with historic events. It is focused on the famine in Ukraine, the famine genocide during 1932-33, and that is sort of taken life in a project called Project Maria. and that just finished in Landskrona in Sweden and is now moving to Kyiv, and we hope will continue to move throughout Europe. And I'm currently working on another project called This Land is Made for You and Me, and it's all about Canada's first national internment operations. So in these projects, I end up very much working with archival materials and reinterpreting those, and so that is very, very fulfilling for me. And with each of my projects, I will always make 2 books because I love books. So my projects are always sort of large-scale installations, sometimes using textiles. There'll be film, there'll be books. So it brings together all the things that I love. It all starts with the camera, but you know, at the end, we end up with this sort of multimedia language to tell a story. You know, my parents were really incredible storytellers. I mean, my father was a, you know, round the table kind of storyteller, and my mother's a written storyteller. So I come from a family of people who tell stories. We're also a family of collectors, and I think my works are in many ways they're collections of things, right, that I'm bringing together to try to tell a story to as many different people as I can. Oh, wow, that's a really big question. You know what? I think I have one piece of advice. Okay, here we go. Every day of life is sort of like a coloring book, and you have a whole slate of colors to work with. And some days are going to be much more yellow and just beautiful pink or purple, whatever you love. And others might be more chiaroscuro with grays and blacks. But somehow, if one can learn to embrace all of it, to accept everything that life brings, and to understand how you take that and make it an opportunity, really, to give something to someone else, to learn from it and then to offer something. I think, you know, for me, that was the greatest lesson in life, just to appreciate, you know, the positive nature and the negative nature of life. And also, I think it's sometimes very, very difficult to find yourself and to say, my song might be a little bit different, you know? You know, it takes a lot of courage, and it's wonderful if you can find a mentor to support you. And I think those are the kinds of things I'd be looking for. I'd really be trying to, through time, finding your voice and see if you can find someone who hears it. Because if you can do that, they can help you grow and learn to give. Giving is underrated because it creates connection with people in life. So when you give of yourself, I think you expand also the opportunity to come into connection with so many other people. And those kinds of experiences shape the world we live in. They shape your immediate world. They shape the world of someone else. And I think if there was ever a time where we needed to learn to be, you know, to find our voices and be empathetic and connect with others, I think that's terribly important as we move forward.
I think that's amazing advice, Lesia.
Mm-hmm.
You've received so many awards all over the world. How important was that Nation Builders Award that you just received here?
You know, every award has been important because there's a group of people that are looking at what you're doing, and you know, they see something that has impacted a community. And so for me, I'm always overwhelmed, actually. I think when my work is recognized, I'm also overwhelmed because I know I don't do any of this alone. I know that, you know, everything and anything I've been part of has been something I've done with others. So I'm always, you know, very mindful of that. And, you know, I have to say I'm so grateful to the Ukrainian, you know, the UCC of Saskatchewan. Now, how important is it to me? Well, you know, I remember sometimes when you're involved in awards, you actually know that you've been nominated, you might get one, you know. I remember one day I opened this piece of correspondence, right? And it said I was getting this award. And I had no idea. So I was like going, me? Why me? The first thing I do is I call my mother. I said, I just got this letter, right? I said, did you know anything about this? And she goes, well, actually I did, right? And she goes, but I wasn't supposed to tell you. And I said, well, you did a very good job, right? So, you know, I have been away from Saskatchewan for so long. And I speak of it as my homeland. And someone said to me, you know, you're so lucky to have a place you love so much. And I said, you're very right. So to have, you know, what I've done, what I'm trying to do, recognized by, you know, my homeland community, is very moving. And I'm also very proud for many reasons. You know, there are at least 3, if not 4 people from that little village of 110 people who have been recognized by the UCC in Saskatchewan. And I'll always come back to, you know, what it meant to grow up in the prairies, what it meant to be that prairie girl, especially in my little town. And I'm sure there were others just like it in the province, but, you know, 110 people, maybe 3 were not Ukrainian, okay? The language on the street was Ukrainian. And you learned how to be a citizen of the world in that village because you were surrounded by people that were, you know, putting on concerts. Nobody was getting paid for anything. You did it because you loved it. You learned how to do, to give, and be together in community because you loved it. And I'm grateful that I grew up in that kind of a world. And so I think sometimes that's why I'm so humbled by the award, because I did what I was taught to do by my community. These were my mentors and my role models. And, you know, I'm so very grateful for all of them. I also, you know, my work in Saskatchewan isn't done. I very much, you know, the house that appears in all of my photographs, we're working very hard to bring that back to life. And so I feel very connected to my province, to have it recognize, you know, what I've done, much of which I want to bring back to it is, you know, is probably among one of the top honors that I've received. And so I still feel like a little prairie girl when it comes to receiving that award, because in my heart, Saskatchewan and the Ukrainian people and the people that nominated me and that worked with me to make all that happen are so big in my world. I respect them so much. So yeah, I'm terribly grateful.
A lot of notable Canadians came from Saskatchewan and did great.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, Lesia, you've said that the late Peter Lindbergh has been an inspiration to you for a long time. And in your 2017 interview with him, Peter said to you, there is one other way to find this place inside of you. This way is less secure, even dangerous and risky, but it could be worth trying. This way would request you to abandon your roots and securities, and to maybe find in exchange total freedom, independence from and for yourself and your work. How close are you to embracing this idea of Peter Lindbergh's?
It's a, you know, it's a really interesting idea, and Peter was a very profound thinker and, you know, well, an incredibly celebrated artist. And I know one thing about artists, at least the ones I've known, they all love freedom. You know, they want to talk about freedom. They want all the freedom in the world. And then, you know, I love when so many of them realize, you know, none of us can have complete freedom. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way. I think that, and I remember when Peter wrote that to me, he actually wrote it and he, you know, he said, okay, you know, I wrote him back to say, okay, what do you mean by dangerous? You know, how dangerous is this going to be? You know, that was my reaction. You know, can I take that much risk? And if I think about Peter, even, you know, if I had to ask Peter, did you get complete freedom? Because Peter grew up, was born in a very small town in Poland that is now in Germany, and it was an industrial part of Germany. And his work was so profoundly influenced by that place, the mood of that place, the quality of it. So, you know, his roots definitely came through all of his work. I think what Peter gave me, and I guess that'll be my answer to the question, is, you know, when someone like Peter Lindbergh likes your work, when he says you're my favorite artist, that too is horribly overwhelming. It's like the biggest expectation you're going to have to live up to. And possibly, you know, someone you're going to disappoint as well at the same time. But I think that it told me to trust myself. And it told me that if there was something inside saying something, like the work I make, you know, I often go, you know, my work isn't going to end up in most people's dining rooms, all right? But my work, you know, does end up in museums. People walk among it, they cry. My work has another place. So I have to be able, as an artist, to trust what my intuition is telling me, to not be afraid to follow it. And sometimes artists make incredible sacrifices in their personal lives to be able to bring their art into the world. And I think, you know, that's part of, you know, what Peter definitely wanted for me, was that kind of freedom to allow my art to come to life. And so in that sense, I hope I never get there, only in the sense that the journey then can be very long in trying to. And so he serves as an inspiration for me always. I'm always mindful of, you know, the freedom to express and for my art to be what I believe it should be. And so it's a journey. It's definitely a journey.
Thank you for that answer.
Yeah, you're welcome. What do we have next?
You've had many exhibits in Ukraine, and I'm wondering if you sense a difference in how your exhibitions were received in Ukraine versus many of the other areas that you've had exhibitions in.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think every country has its own reaction to what you're bringing, because either they're familiar with it, you know, like let's say the Holodomor, or they're not familiar with it. What I remember when I toured Ukraine in 2017 was that they were profoundly, you know, interested in the fact that I was this, you know, almost fourth generation Canadian, still wanting to tell these stories. You know, so that was very intriguing to the people I met. They were very intrigued that, you know, I was still able to speak Ukrainian. So there were many things in Ukraine that were unique because I was coming there as a Ukrainian Canadian. I think also, you know, I was very fortunate when I exhibited in Kharkiv. You know, we had, you know, one of the lead representatives, Roman Piatkovka from the Kharkiv School of Photography there. So he came to speak, you know, at the opening. And so he brought to that exhibition, you know, a viewpoint on my work that was particularly unique, because I was a Ukrainian Canadian coming back with, you know, Ukrainian themed work into the heart of, you know, the area of Ukraine that in essence gave birth to this movement of photography specifically. So I think they had a, you know, in that instance, you know, there was a very particular lens on, you know, the work that I was bringing to Ukraine. And for me, I remember that was very, very important, because when Roman spoke at the opening, I mean, the fact that he even came, you know, was a big deal. You know, everybody was saying, will Piatkovka come, right? And he did. But, you know, he began to see my work and say that, it, you know, it was contemporary. So it was very interesting to bring photography into that, in that spot in Ukraine. And that is, you know, a completely unique opportunity. So I think, those are some of the key observations, that I would share. I think with Project Maria that's opening this Friday, I think that's going to be, another opportunity to see, a very particular reaction to the work, because it's, it's shown in the US. So there we have an audience that is completely, has had sort of no prior knowledge of this genocide. But now we're taking it, home. And so, the reactions so far have been, very, very moving. And so I'm going to be very curious to see, how Project Maria is received in Kyiv, and, the plans are to move it, within Ukraine and beyond there. So Ukraine is always interesting. The different parts of the country are always interesting. I was very lucky in that we went, the work that I took, Reina Zemlya, I Am the Land, was shown in Kharkiv, Odessa, Lviv, and oh my gosh, Kyiv. So it was, it was a really wonderful opportunity also for me to go back to Ukraine after having been away for 25 years. So yeah, the reactions were, it was, as I was saying earlier when we talked about solo exhibitions, I have a great interest in seeing how the people will be in the space, right? And, I so wish I was in Kyiv on Friday to see how they will be in that space. Yeah.
I'm sure it will be amazingly well received, and I'm sure they would have liked to have had you there as well, Lesia.
Mm.
Will it be shown in the same cities as your Krajina exhibit?
We have yet to sort of, that part hasn't been decided yet. We'll see. I think there's a strong influence in taking it to some of the areas that were most affected by the famine. And, I have to say that, I extend my, my heartfelt thanks and more to the Ukrainian World Congress, because they have been a supporter of Project Maria since it started, but they are the ones that are making, that made it possible for Maria to be in Kyiv. And, under the leadership of Stefan Romaniev, who's the first vice president of the UWC, and also he chairs the International Coordinating Committee on Holodomor Awareness. So his leadership has, seen and made it possible for Project Maria to be in Kyiv and to move beyond that. So we'll see where it moves. I think one of the things I'm realizing, and that's going to drive some of my next work, is that it may not be possible for, an installation of this size to get everywhere. So, I'm hoping to develop a Project Maria in the box that will be able to be used as a pedagogical tool, that will be able to be shared in, smaller communities in Ukraine that were affected in, in Sumshchina and Poltava, so that, many people can see this, because there are many people in Ukraine that may not even know about the Holodomor because of all of the misinformation campaigns that have been going on and continue to go on. And, there are others that may have, a surface knowledge of it. So, there's a strong interest to have as broad a reach with the project as possible, but just using different forms of doing that. Yeah.
Great. Well, wish you well with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And with that, Lesia, thank you very, very much for taking us on that wonderful tour through your beautiful work, your meaningful work, and for sharing your art with us here this evening. And there have been a few questions and comments that have been put into the chat. And so we'll move into the question and answer period of the webinar. And I would encourage our audience to continue to put questions into the chat, and I will go through or comments, I should say, and I'll go through them sort of from start to finish. So the first is more of a comment from Iris Bradley, who is also from Saskatchewan, who considers herself having a dual citizenship, Saskatchewan and Canadian. So I think you can certainly relate to that. And Iris comments how proud she is of you, and I think she speaks for, certainly everyone here, if not all Ukrainians, for doing what you do. on behalf of all of us and bringing the Holodomor to the forefront as it should be. So the second question is from our UNF Ottawa-Gatineau president, Simon Sulima. He's written a bit of a comment and a question, so I'll read what he has written. So Simon writes, "Thank you for such a wonderful and touching presentation, Lesia. Holodomor is personal to my family too. I have two questions. Is there a plan to bring your project Maria to Ottawa?" Maybe I'll let you answer that one first.
Not that I'm aware of.
But never say never, right?
Absolutely not.
Perfect. Good. All right. We have another project for UNF Ottawa-Gatineau, it seems. And then the second part to that, he says, "Growing up in Ukraine, I haven't heard much about Holodomor up until about 2005, 2006. Even though Holodomor is very personal to my family as my grandparents were survivors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very saddened that so many people out there, especially in Russia, still deny its existence. How do you think Canada helped raise awareness of the Holodomor? And I'll add, how do you think we can do better?"
Clearly, I think Canada's done a lot. I mean, we have, sorry, I've got all my wildlife going right now. We've got clearly the work that's been done by many of the community-based organizations to raise awareness. Right now, there's a huge petition ongoing through the, I believe it's the Bus Awareness Tour program, and it's called Deep Truth, and that's to get the word Holodomor even into English language dictionaries. I mean, if you can believe, the word doesn't exist in the dictionary, so there's a petition out there that, people can go ahead and sign. And I think that's part of it. I mean, I looked at the petition today because we've even designed posters saying Holodomor and a little definition on the side to encourage people to sign the petition. And so each of us has a responsibility. So if anyone hasn't signed the petition, I encourage you to do that. Now, the Ukrainian World Congress has an international coordinating body, and Project Maria is one of its lead projects. So I know we're working really hard, all across the diaspora to have the Holodomor recognized in our states, our provinces, our countries, to bring this into the dictionary. Project Maria, I think, is a huge sort of venture in Ukraine. And I'm even, I was deeply touched by the language the museum was using in terms of the importance that they put on this exhibition. So this is another way that we start to tell the story. But, I'll always come down to it. We each hold a responsibility. I try to do it through my art. And each one of us has a vehicle, whether it's the people we talk to, how do we share the story? So I think there's always room. Of course, there's always room for us to do more, but we need to take responsibility. We can't always look to organizations. And I mean, you're very right in saying the knowledge in Ukraine and in some areas, there's a lot of room to do good work. And it's, through no fault of their own. I mean, the archives have been closed, the misinformation campaigns, the denial. I mean, those are very strong forces at work. But I think there's something for each of us to do in that.
Well put, well put.
Yeah. Lesia, where can we find this petition that you mentioned if we wanted to sign it?
Google Deep Truth. You should be able to find it. And if not, I'll make sure that you have a link and maybe the UNF can share it. Mm-hmm. Because I know they've exceeded 15,000 signatures on the petition, and they're hoping to get 25,000 signatures. So there's a fantastic opportunity to do something that would be so important, to have the word Holodomor in the dictionary. I mean, it's been 87 years. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I think we can start with that. That's a really simple act. Sign a petition.
Wonderful. Great idea. And we'll be sure to send that around to our membership.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Forward it along. Absolutely. I have a question, Lesia. I mean, I find your work absolutely stunning, and you mentioned not hanging it up in someone's home, but if folks are interested in a souvenir of sorts, you talk about the books that you've created, or, if they wanted to take, a piece of your art to their homes, how would our members do that? How would we access your work?
My artwork could be accessed directly through me. So if there's anyone, interested in talking about that, we can do that, directly. I'm sure my email will be shared and it's readily available. The book Maria is published in Ukraine. So that was published, that was very much a collaborative effort with the team that I have there, and that's Red Zet Publications. And in fact, they were the ones responsible for creating and putting up my installation in Kyiv. So we're just going to make sure that we have books available. So if anybody wanted to order those, again, I would suggest, just contact me directly.
Perfect. Great. And yes, with your permission, we will share your contact information with our membership then, for sure. All right. There is one comment from Olenka Galadza, who is very grateful, again, like many of us, that you've brought Holodomor awareness to the world with such beauty and sensitivity. So actually, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful summary of what you've been able to accomplish with your art. So thank you for that. Are there?
I just wanted to pick up on that briefly, and it was something that Marianne Redding mentioned, and that was, the beauty behind the work. And there's a huge ethical consideration when you're dealing with subjects that are this difficult and making them too beautiful.
Yes.
But someone said to me, what it does do is it allows people to approach something that is terribly difficult. And if it was horrific on the walls, they might be afraid to do that. But because it is beautiful, they can come to it. And then they slowly read, and then they gently learn what it's about. And I think that, that's important. And it's not something I try to do artificially. I think, this is one of the things that just happens. But thank you for pointing to this notion of beauty, because beauty can be, I think, like a gentle, warm hand holding you when you're moving to something that is complicated and difficult.
Absolutely. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but we'll give people maybe another 30 seconds or so to furiously type something in the chat for Lesia.
I guess while we're waiting, I'd just like to thank everyone. I would like to thank the Ottawa-Gatineau branch of the UNF. Clearly, I'm very grateful to, those of you that thought this story and talking a little bit about the art was worthwhile doing during Holodomor month. And, I'm honored to have been able to participate. I'd like to again extend my thanks to the Ukrainian World Congress, to the UCC Saskatchewan. And, this idea, where we first started was, how did this idea come to you? And it came to me a couple of years ago. And there were a whole series of organizations that supported that early period of the work. There was the UNF, the National Federation, the national area of it, the local, the Ukrainian Credit Union, the Shevchenko Foundation, the Franco Foundation, the Vasilik Foundation. So there were many organizations that were involved to support the work so that it could in fact get to the stage it's at right now. And so I'm very, very thankful for that, because again, artists, very much depend on support to bring their work into the world. And that's very much true for all the work that I've done. So I just want to thank very much all of the communities that have seen value in what I've tried to do.
Wonderful. Okay. And right on time.
Perfect.
Almost 8 o'clock. I think we can certainly close this wonderful webinar. And again, Lesia, thank you so much for sharing your time and your gift with us. To Vicky and Olu for being such wonderful moderators, to UKU for supporting us with the Zoom license, and certainly to all of you who have joined us this evening. Thank you for joining our virtual events, for supporting UNF Ottawa-Gatineau. We certainly are happy to have you, and we'll continue to put on these sorts of events for the duration of the pandemic, however long that might be. And we will be in touch fairly soon with renewals for next year's memberships and how that's all going to work. So please keep an eye on your inboxes. And as Lesia said, we will be sending around her contact information as well as notice when this is posted to our YouTube channel. So with that, I will wish everyone a wonderful evening and looking forward to seeing you all at our next event. All right, good night.
Good night.
Good night.